Briar Hollow was a small, quiet town tucked deep in the forests of Pennsylvania. In 1944, it seemed like nothing out of the ordinary ever happened there. Neighbors knew each other by name, and the streets were lined with familiar faces. But the tranquility of the town was shattered one crisp autumn morning when 7 high school students, best friends who were inseparable, disappeared without a trace. They had planned a short trip into the forest, laughing and joking as they packed sandwiches and backpacks, never imagining that this would be the last time anyone would see them. The students were ordinary kids with ordinary dreams, yet there was something almost magnetic about the group. People in town often saw them wandering near the edge of the woods, sketching the trees, collecting odd rocks, and telling stories about shadows they swore moved on their own. It was this curiosity, some said, that led them too far. On that fateful morning, they left their small town behind and disappeared into the thick canopy, leaving only footprints that quickly vanished into the undergrowth. By the afternoon, panic had begun to set in. The students didn't return home for lunch, and when the evening came with no word, families rushed to the town authorities. Search parties formed quickly, with neighbors grabbing lanterns and flashlights, moving in tense silence through the winding paths of the forest. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made hearts race. But the deeper the searchers went, the emptier the forest seemed. The air itself felt heavier, as if the woods were swallowing sound and light, hiding something the town had never seen before. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the students had gotten lost, trapped in a hidden cave or old mine shaft. Others whispered darker theories, that the forest was cursed, that a malevolent force claimed the curious, or that something else, something that didn't belong in this world, had taken them. Each story grew taller and more sinister as days passed, feeding the fear that gripped Briar Hollow. The town was no longer safe, or so it seemed, and the cheerful streets were now shadows of themselves, haunted by the absence of 7 young lives. Even decades later, residents would recall that morning with a shiver. The memory of those kids walking into the forest, full of life and laughter, was now frozen in fear and mystery. No one could explain how a simple day trip had turned into a haunting legend. The trees seemed taller, darker, and more foreboding, and whispers of the vanished students lingered in the wind. Briar Hollow would never be the same. That one morning in 1944 became the day the town's innocence vanished along with the 7 students. As darkness fell over Briar Hollow that first night, fear quickly turned to panic. Families gathered in the town hall, their faces pale and drawn, as local police tried to organize search parties. Lanterns flickered in the gathering gloom, casting eerie shadows against the walls, and the townspeople whispered nervously about the 7 missing students. Every parent's mind raced with worst-case scenarios, imagining their children lost, hurt, or worse. The once familiar forest now seemed alien, full of hidden dangers and ominous sounds that hadn't been noticed before. The first search parties moved cautiously along the winding trails that led into the dense forest. The air was thick with fog, and every crack of a branch underfoot made hearts leap. Dogs were brought along, but even their keen noses seemed unable to follow a trail. Volunteers called out names, their voices swallowed by the towering trees, as if the forest itself were holding the students hostage. Hours passed with no sign of the missing teenagers, and an uneasy silence settled over the searchers, broken only by distant, unidentifiable noises that made the hairs on their necks stand on end. As the night deepened, more people joined the search, lighting torches and heading deeper into the woods. It wasn't just concern anymore. There was a growing sense of dread, a realization that something about this disappearance was not normal. Shadows seemed to shift in ways that didn't make sense, and some searchers claimed to catch glimpses of fleeting figures darting between trees. Each sighting vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind nothing but the cold, empty forest. Whispers of the students' laughter, or what sounded like laughter, haunted those who dared venture far from the town, chilling them to their very core. By dawn, the search had yielded nothing, not even a single clue to where the students had gone. Families returned home, exhausted and terrified, their hopes dwindling with the morning light. The town's sense of security had been shattered, and fear hung over every house like a thick, suffocating fog. Even the local authorities began to whisper that the forest might be hiding something unnatural, though they spoke in hushed tones, careful not to alarm the town further. The idea that the students had simply wandered off seemed impossible, and every failed search only deepened the mystery. Rumors began to take hold almost immediately. Some believed the students had stumbled into an abandoned mine, or fallen victim to some hidden hazard within the forest. Others whispered that they had been taken by someone or something unknown and malevolent. The town itself felt watched, as if the disappearance had awakened something long buried in the shadows. Parents and neighbors spent sleepless nights listening for the faintest sound of children's voices, hoping against hope for a miracle that never came. The panic was only the beginning. Briar Hollow was about to discover that the forest's secrets were far darker than anyone could have imagined. Decades had passed, and Briar Hollow had slowly tried to bury the memory of the 7 missing students. Life went on, but the forest remained a place of whispered fear, avoided by everyone who valued their peace of mind. Then, in the 1970s, a local historian named Samuel Hayes was sorting through the forgotten corners of Briar Hollow High School's basement when he stumbled upon a dusty, cobweb-covered box. Inside was a collection of old school memorabilia, yearbooks, letters, and faded photographs. But what caught his eye was a single photograph that made his stomach turn, a photograph that had been forgotten for more than 30 years. The photograph was black and white, yellowed at the edges, and slightly curled from age. It depicted the 7 missing students standing together in the forest, their arms loosely around each other. At first glance, it seemed innocent, almost cheerful, like a typical snapshot from 1944. But the longer Hayes stared, the more he realized something was deeply, disturbingly wrong. Their faces were expressionless, their eyes dark and hollow, almost as if someone had drained the life from them. The background seemed warped, the trees bending unnaturally, and the shadows in the corners of the frame looked almost like shapes, like something watching. Hayes showed the photograph to a few trusted townspeople, and their reactions were immediate and visceral. Some gasped, some whispered prayers, and others simply turned away, unable to face what the image seemed to reveal. For many, it was proof that the forest had claimed the students in some way beyond explanation. Skeptics argued that it was just an old photo, damaged by time, or perhaps a trick of the light. But even they couldn't shake the feeling of unease, a cold shiver that ran down the spine whenever the image was mentioned. The photograph quickly became the talk of Briar Hollow. People speculated endlessly. Had the students been trapped in the forest? Had they seen something they weren't meant to see? Some theorized that the forest itself had somehow captured them, frozen them in time, or pulled them into another realm entirely. The town had always whispered about strange lights and sounds in the woods, but now those whispers had a tangible connection, a physical proof that the missing students had not simply vanished, but that something dark and inexplicable had claimed them. As news of the photograph spread, investigators and journalists came to Briar Hollow, hoping to uncover the truth. But the photograph resisted explanation. No one could determine how it had survived so long, or why it showed the students in a manner that seemed almost unnatural. Even the most rational minds were unsettled by it. The image didn't just depict the past. It seemed to echo something alive, something that had been watching over the town for decades, waiting to be discovered. The lost students were no longer just missing. They were haunting the very heart of Briar Hollow, and the photograph had become the first real clue in a mystery that refused to fade with time. As investigators and curious townsfolk examined the photograph, whispers about Briar Hollow's past began to surface. The town, once considered quiet and unremarkable, seemed to harbor secrets that stretched back long before the 7 students vanished. Elderly residents spoke in hushed tones of strange occurrences in the forest, tales that had been dismissed as superstition for decades. They recalled missing livestock, eerie sounds echoing at night, and lights that moved unnaturally between the trees. Briar Hollow's charm had always masked something darker, a shadow that lurked just beneath the surface, and now it was impossible to ignore. During interviews, some of the town's oldest families revealed disturbing patterns. They recounted stories of people who had wandered into the forest and never returned, long before 1944. There were mentions of abandoned cabins, secret pathways, and cryptic symbols carved into the trees, so old they were nearly impossible to decipher. Local children had been warned never to venture too far, yet curiosity often drew them closer. The town's history suggested that the forest had a way of keeping its secrets, a force that seemed almost sentient, capable of hiding anything, and anyone, who ventured too deep. Investigators began examining old maps and town records, looking for any clue to explain the repeated vanishings. They found references to the forest being called the Hollow long before the town's founding, and old newspaper clippings hinted at mysterious disappearances that were never fully explained. Residents spoke of people who returned changed, silent and haunted, as if the forest had marked them. Even in the daylight, the woods had an uncanny presence. Trees that appeared twisted into unnatural shapes, shadows that seemed to move against the wind, and a chilling stillness that settled over anyone who stepped too far in. Some researchers suggested the forest was cursed. though the term seemed almost too simple for what they were witnessing. Stories of ritualistic symbols, strange sounds, and inexplicable lights painted a picture of a place that existed on the border of reality and something far darker. Townspeople recalled feeling watched, even in their own homes, and some claimed that the missing students had uncovered something they weren't meant to see. The photograph only strengthened these suspicions. It wasn't just a record of their disappearance, but a window into whatever sinister force lingered in Briar Hollow. The deeper the investigation went, the more uneasy the town became. Locals who had once dismissed the forest as harmless now hesitated even to speak about it. Those who ventured near its edges reported sudden chills, shadows moving in the corner of their eyes, and whispers carried on the wind that seemed almost human. The town's hidden secrets weren't just stories anymore, they were palpable, and everyone realized that the forest had been watching Briar Hollow long before the 7 students disappeared. What it wanted, or why it had claimed them, remained a mystery, but one thing was clear. The town itself had been part of something far darker than anyone had imagined. As the town of Briar Hollow tried to make sense of the photograph, experts in the paranormal began to take interest. Some claimed the image was not just a photo, it was a portal, a glimpse into another reality. The students, they argued, had not merely disappeared. They had been trapped in something beyond human understanding. Skeptics scoffed at the notion, but those who studied the image closely noticed anomalies that defied logic. Shadows twisted in impossible directions, and the forest behind the students appeared almost alive, as if the trees themselves were watching and waiting. Paranormal investigators visited the forest, setting up cameras, sensors, and recording devices. What they captured was chilling. On silent, foggy nights, faint lights moved between the trees in ways that no human could account for. Occasionally, soft laughter, childlike, yet hollow, echoed through the undergrowth, only to vanish when anyone approached. Some of the investigators claimed to feel unseen hands brushing against their arms, and a suffocating cold would descend without warning, even on warm summer nights. Each new experience seemed to confirm what the town had long feared, that the forest had claimed the students in a way the natural world could not explain. Locals began sharing stories that had been whispered for generations. Some said the forest had a will of its own, a sentience that fed on curiosity and fear. People recalled wandering children who returned changed, silent, their eyes distant as if they had glimpsed something no one else could comprehend. Others claimed that those who lingered too long in the hollow felt a pull, a force urging them deeper into the darkness, where the forest's secrets waited. Over time, these stories coalesced into a chilling theory. The forest had chosen the students, claiming them not as victims, but as something else entirely. Even the photograph itself seemed to confirm these fears. The students' faces, pale and expressionless, suggested awareness without life, as though they existed in a place where time had stopped. Some paranormal experts theorized that the image was evidence of a liminal space, a world parallel to our own, where the forest's power trapped those who wandered too far. Others suggested it might be a warning, left behind to tell the town that the hollow's reach extended beyond what anyone could imagine. The more people examined it, the more the feeling grew that the students were still there, somewhere between this world and the next, their presence frozen in the haunting photograph. Rumors of supernatural activity spread like wildfire, drawing thrill-seekers, journalists, and ghost hunters to Briar Hollow. Those who dared enter the forest reported feelings of dread that went beyond normal fear. Compasses spun wildly, GPS devices failed, and even radios emitted static and whispers that sounded almost like voices. Every new account seemed to reinforce the terrifying idea that the forest was alive in a way humans couldn't understand. It wasn't just a place where the students had vanished, it was a force that had watched over the town for decades, silently selecting, claiming, and leaving only questions in its wake. In the summer of 2019, nearly 75 years after the 7 students vanished, a local teenager named Emily Harper decided to explore the forest on the outskirts of Briar Hollow. Known for its dense undergrowth and twisted trails, the forest had long been avoided by anyone with a shred of caution. But Emily's curiosity, and a desire for adventure, pushed her forward. Armed with a flashlight and her camera, she moved cautiously through the overgrown paths, unaware that she was about to stumble upon something that would reignite the town's darkest mystery. After hours of wandering, Emily's foot struck something solid beneath a thick layer of leaves and dirt. Brushing away the debris, she discovered the entrance to a nearly buried shed. Its wooden frame was rotting, and the door creaked ominously as she pushed it open. Inside, dust swirled in the shafts of light that pierced the cracks in the walls. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly curtains, and the air smelled of decay. But it was what lay on a wooden table in the center of the room that made her freeze. A second photograph, remarkably well preserved, resting under a thin layer of grime. The photograph was immediately unsettling. Like the first, it showed the 7 missing students, but this time, they were standing in a circle, their hands clasped together, faces pale and hollow-eyed. Surrounding them were symbols etched into the dirt, strange and intricate, unlike anything Emily had ever seen. The forest behind them looked darker than reality, as if the trees themselves were bending inward, forming shapes that were almost human. Something about the image felt alive. It radiated a presence that made Emily's skin crawl. She instinctively knew that she had discovered something far more than a historical curiosity. Emily ran to the town, photograph in hand, to show the authorities and historians. Word spread quickly, and soon experts arrived to study the image. Some believed it was evidence that the students had been trapped in a supernatural space, a world where time and reality were warped. Others speculated that the forest itself had preserved a memory of the students, like a recording etched into the very soil. Every theory, however, agreed on one terrifying point. The photograph was proof that the Hollow had not forgotten the children, and whatever force had claimed them remained active, waiting, and aware. The discovery reignited fear and fascination throughout Briar Hollow. People spoke in hushed tones of the circle in the photo and the strange markings surrounding it. Paranormal enthusiasts speculated that the students were still there, frozen in a liminal space, visible only to those brave, or foolish, enough to look. Emily's find became the centerpiece of a mystery that spanned generations, a tangible link between the vanished children of 1944 and the present day. Briar Hollow, once thought to be haunted only by memories, was now confronted with living proof that its darkest secrets were far from buried. Even decades after the 1944 disappearance, Briar Hollow could never escape the shadow of the 7 missing students. Locals spoke in whispers of fleeting figures glimpsed at the edge of the forest, always moving just beyond clear sight. Some claimed to see children's laughter carried on the wind at dusk, soft and echoing, yet chilling in its emptiness. Windows rattled for no apparent reason, and doors creaked open as if unseen hands were testing the boundaries of the homes that bordered the forest. The town's uneasy sleep was punctuated by an invisible presence that refused to leave. Visitors who ventured too close to the forest often reported strange sensations. They felt watched, as if unseen eyes tracked their every step. GPS devices failed, compasses spun uncontrollably, and electronics flickered in inexplicable ways. The deeper one wandered, the heavier the air seemed to grow, almost suffocating, pressing down with the weight of something unseen. Locals warned that the forest itself was alive, a sentient force that remembered those who had disappeared and those who dared to trespass. Even the bravest explorers found themselves retreating, driven back by a fear that could not be named. Parents of new generations of children told stories in hushed voices, passing on warnings that had been told for decades. Never go too far into the hollow, they said. It watches. It waits. For many, these were just cautionary tales, but every so often, the forest proved the warnings were real. Shadows that moved independently of natural light were reported, and faint voices, almost like whispers in another language, could be heard among the trees. Briar Hollow had become a town caught between normal life and something profoundly unnatural, a place where the past and present collided in ways that were impossible to explain. Even town events and celebrations were touched by the forest's eerie presence. Residents spoke of sudden cold winds during summer fairs, unexplained flickers in lantern light, and fleeting glimpses of children running across fields where no one should have been. The lost students were no longer just a memory. They had become part of the town's very fabric. Their absence was a constant, invisible weight, a reminder that some mysteries could never be truly solved. Briar Hollow existed in a delicate balance between reality and something darker, a line easily crossed by the curious or the unwary. Visitors and locals alike agreed that the Hollow's influence extended beyond the forest's edge. Even those who had never ventured near the woods claimed to feel its presence in quiet moments. Shivers down the spine, fleeting shadows in their peripheral vision, and dreams that felt too real to be mere imagination. The town had been marked by its history, its 7 missing children frozen in time and space, a lingering reminder that the past never truly leaves. The Hollow's watchful gaze persisted, a silent guardian, or captor, ensuring that Briar Hollow would never forget, and that its secrets remained just out of reach. And so, the mystery of the 7 students of Briar Hollow remains unsolved. The forest still whispers their names on quiet nights, and the shadows of those vanished children linger at the edge of vision, watching, waiting. Some say if you walk too close to the hollow after dusk, you can feel a presence guiding you, or warning you, not to go further. The photograph, lost for decades, revealed only a glimpse of the truth. But the rest is hidden, buried in the twisted trees, the dark soil, and the secrets the town will never fully uncover. Briar Hollow endures, haunted by what cannot be explained, and perhaps by what cannot be explained intentionally. The forest holds its secrets tightly, its silence heavier than any words. And somewhere, just beyond the reach of the last rays of sunlight, those 7 students may still exist, not alive in the way we know, but not entirely gone either. A presence frozen between worlds, a warning for anyone who dares to uncover the hollow's darkest truths. So the next time you hear laughter carried on the wind in a forest, or see shadows moving where no one should be, remember Briar Hollow and the photograph that shattered everything. Because some mysteries don't end, they wait. And sometimes, just sometimes, they reach out to you.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.